Our sources today really back this up, that the most potent wisdom, the most explosive warnings, they're not always in those big sagas.
Yeah, sometimes they're hidden.
They're hidden almost dismissively in just a single quiet sentence. And that's what we're doing today. We're doing a really deep, almost surgical extraction of meaning from a biblical figure who gets, virtually no screen time at all.
That's absolutely right. When most people think about Genesis, their minds go straight to the giants, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and of course Esau.
Of course, Esau, the hunter.
The fiery, dynamic Esau, the one famous for trading away his entire generational wealth, his blessing, his birthright, for what?
A bowl of lentil soup.
It's the classic cautionary tale. It is. But the insights we've been analyzing today, they really insist that if you want to understand the full devastating measure of Esau's character and the ultimate consequence of his choices, you have to look past the stew. You have to focus on the woman mentioned almost as an afterthought, a woman named Judith.
Judith. And it's a name that it's almost unfamiliar, isn't it? Even for people who have studied this ancient narrative dozens of times, she's glossed over. An incidental detail.
Completely.
So our mission for this deep dive is exactly that. We want to elevate this seemingly minor character and explore how a person mentioned in a single sentence, a single historical note, became this critical, powerful warning that, it fundamentally shaped the destiny of a pivotal family in Scripture. We're focusing entirely on the profound, often invisible weight of what seem like small, impulsive choices.
And this is where the source material we are diving into is just so valuable. It takes a minimal amount of text, specifically Genesis 26.3, 4, and 35, and it meticulously demonstrates how you can extract massive insight from it.
Into what, specifically?
Into spiritual alignment, into these incredibly complex family dynamics, and into cascading consequence. It's a powerful lesson, especially for the modern learner, in paying attention to every single detail the text bothers to include.
Even when those details are really sparse.
Especially when they're sparse. Because sometimes, the shortest entries hold the deepest warnings.
Okay, let's unpack this right away. Because when we say minimal, we are not exaggerating at all. She is essentially the woman of one sentence.
That's a perfect way to put it.
The text gives us this precise reference, Genesis 26.34. And this verse is the setup for absolutely everything that follows, the whole family crisis. It just states, when Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite.
And that's it. That is the entire introduction for Judith and her co-wife, Basemath. And the source analysis is very, very clear on this lack of data. It says, no long story, no dramatic scene, no recorded words. And here is where we really need to focus our analysis. That silence.
Yeah.
That silence itself is a critical analytical point. We don't know her motivations, we don't know what she looked like, or her personal history in any detail. Nothing.
So the lack of information is actually a deliberate structural choice by the ancient writer.
It has to be.
Which raises a crucial question that you, as a learner, should be asking. What does this complete scarcity of detail imply? If the narrative dedicates so much space to the actions and even the dreams of other characters, why is Judith's story just condensed into a single fact? She married Esau and she was a Hittite. Does that make her disposable to the narrative?
And the sources argue vehemently that no, actually, it makes her absolutely central.
How so?
They suggest that her presence was the message, not her actions or her words. The fact that there's no dialogue, no specific personal actions, it actually enhances her role as a symbol.
A symbol of what?
She wasn't simply an individual wife. She was like a spiritual thermometer for Esau. Her mere existence in that foundational family context was designed to communicate a profound, immediate warning about her husband's spiritual judgment.
A symbol. A living, breathing warning. And we see the immediate dramatic fallout of this symbolic choice in the very next verse, Genesis 26.35, which names both her and Basemath.
Yes.
The source material highlights that these two women made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah. This is where that snapshot of one wedding suddenly just... It explodes into a full-scale historical family crisis.
It does. And we need to pause and really analyze that phrase because the source material doesn't use it lightly. Made life bitter.
It sounds so intense.
It is. This was not just, the typical minor friction you might get when a son brings home a new spouse his parents didn't entirely approve of.
No.
The context here suggests something devastating and chronic. It suggests constant, unresolved conflict, this pervasive emotional tension, and most crucially, profound spiritual division.
So if we're drilling down into the nature of that strife, it wasn't about, whether they loaded the dishwasher correctly or how they handled the household finances.
Not at all.
It was a clash of fundamental belief systems, which would make the conflict totally impossible to resolve, right?
Precisely. The core issue, as our sources really emphasize, is that Judith, being a Hittite, didn't worship the God of Abraham. And this is where we need to ground the abstraction for you, the learner. What did it mean to be a Hittite, and why was this lack of spiritual alignment so devastating?
Okay, let's get into that.
The Hittites were a major power in the ancient world. I mean, they were known for their distinct culture, their political strength, and critically, their pantheon of gods. They had very sophisticated polytheistic practices.
So when Esau married Judith, he wasn't just marrying a woman from down the road.
No.
He was integrating a completely different worldview, a different political allegiance, and really fundamentally different religious practices directly into the heart of the home that was meant to carry the one true covenant.
That's the existential crisis right there. For Isaac and Rebekah, who are the direct carriers of the Abrahamic covenant, this covenant of monotheism, of separation from pagan practices, of preserving a pure lineage, this marriage represented contamination.
Contamination, that's a strong word.
It was. The covenant required separation. It mandated that Isaac's descendants only marry those dedicated to the God of Abraham, specifically to maintain the spiritual integrity they needed for their ultimate destiny. So a marriage to a polytheistic Hittite, someone known for worshiping many idols, was seen as a direct, active threat to the very purpose of their existence.
So this division, it moved way beyond simple marital friction into theological warfare played out at the dinner table.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It was theological warfare in their daily lives.
Wow. That context makes the description of the impact on the patriarchs incredibly poignant. The analysis talks about how this marriage clouded the laughter of Isaac. Isaac, whose name literally means he laughs, had his peace, his contentment, his signature joy, essentially stolen by this one catastrophic decision from his son.
It's an unbelievably powerful rhetorical device, isn't it?
Yeah.
It suggests that the grief Isaac and Rebekah felt over this choice wasn't some, quiet internal sadness they just managed privately.
Right. It was public.
It was palpable enough that the historical record documents it as a public consuming family tragedy. We have to try and visualize the emotional climate of that household. The presence of these wives, who actively did not adhere to the foundational faith, introduced an ongoing, unrelenting spiritual stressor.
So for a family chosen by God for this specific, world-altering destiny, the founding of a nation based on this unique covenant, this spiritual division must have felt like absolute sabotage from within.
Like a time bomb planted in their living room.
Yeah.
It was exactly perceived that way because, in the spiritual context of the time, it was. Every single day, Judah's presence served as a constant grinding reminder that the foundational covenant, that sacred promise of God to Abraham's lineage, was under active threat.
And all because of Esau's casual, uninformed, uncovenanted choice.
Exactly. This wasn't a private matter. The integrity of their spiritual continuity was compromised, and the consequence was that the emotional heart of the home was just poisoned. Imagine the tension at every meal, every discussion of the future, every time Isaac offered a sacrifice. The division was present, immediate, and utterly heartbreaking for his parents.
Which brings us directly to the root cause of this whole disaster. It wasn't just a matter of incompatibility, was it? It was a devastating revelation of character on Esau's part.
That's it.
The sources are absolutely clear on this. This disaster happened not by chance, but because Esau didn't choose a wife through prayer. He chose through impulse.
This is the critical turning point in the analysis because it links the marriage right back to the stew. This choice wasn't bad luck. It was a completely predictable symptom of Esau's already established fatal pattern of living. The marriage to Judith became undeniable, tangible evidence of this pattern of impulsivity.
So we can define Esau's destructive behavior using these three key contrasts that the source material outlines. And they apply to both the birthright and the marriage.
Yes, let's break them down.
Okay, the first one is that he lived for the moment, not the promise.
Correct. The promise represented the spiritual future, right? The long-term legacy, the covenant that Isaac and Rebekah were so focused on preserving. Esau, however, was spiritually and emotionally anchored entirely in the immediate sensation.
The present need, the current convenience, the present attraction.
Exactly. He just could not grasp the deep value of something distant, unseen, and spiritual. He was, you might say, constitutionally unable to delay gratification.
The second point follows directly from that. He lived for appetite, not destiny.
And appetite, whether it manifests as a physical hunger for soup or emotional attraction to Judith, it demands instant satisfaction. It's a loud, demanding voice.
Right.
Destiny, by contrast, demands discipline. It demands patience and the often very difficult act of delayed gratification. By choosing a wife who brought division and just ignored the family's spiritual foundation, he prioritized his immediate visceral desire over the monumental generational purpose for which his family existed.
He made a convenience choice that guaranteed future inconvenience.
That's perfectly said.
And the third and perhaps most devastating point in terms of its consequence for the family's future is that he lived for pleasure, not covenant.
The covenant was the binding, sacred agreement with God, the absolute framework for their entire existence. It required relational choices that specifically reinforced rather than undermined that sacred agreement.
So choosing a non-believing Hittite woman showed this fundamental, catastrophic disregard for the covenant requirements.
It showed once again that personal pleasure, convenience, and worldly attraction were just far more compelling to Esau than his sacred obligations. And Judith, in this profound context, she becomes the most significant and lasting collateral damage of Esau's consistent impulsivity.
That allows us to transition so smoothly into part 2 of this, because we have to draw the explicit, almost terrifying parallel between the sale of the stew and the choice of the marriage. The sources link these two choices perfectly, stating that just as Esau traded his birthright for a single bowl of stew, he traded spiritual alignment for a marriage of convenience. It's the same error, just repeated on a much grander, more consequential, and ultimately more disruptive scale.
It is the relentless repetition of that error that illuminates the true, tragic depth of Esau's character flaw. We are looking at two perfect parallels of impulsive, short-term decision-making. They're separated by years, but they are governed by the exact same internal logic.
Let's deep dive into the nature of this impulsivity, because on the surface, they seem like very different issues. One is about satisfying physical hunger, the other is fulfilling a relational need. But the destructive mechanism driving the choice is identical.
It's completely identical. Let's look at the birthright trade first. That was an exchange of a vast, long-term spiritual and material asset. We're talking the future headship of the family, the generational blessing, the double inheritance.
Everything.
Everything. All for a physical, immediate gratification. Satisfying a momentary hunger, you could use a modern analogy here, it's like trading a multi-million-dollar inheritance, which requires complex planning and patience, for immediate, desperate cash to buy a single fast food meal. It was just an instant, foolish transaction.
And then we see that exact same mechanism play out in the marriage choice.
Exactly. This was the exchange of a long-term covenantal necessity, the absolute requirement for a spiritually aligned partner who would preserve the faith, for an emotional, immediate gratification.
Whether that was physical attraction, cultural convenience,
or maybe even local popularity, as the source suggests. The result was a long-term emotional and spiritual disaster. It introduced chaos directly into the spiritual heart of the family that was supposed to carry the future. The stew was a momentary lapse. The marriage was a permanent spiritual yoking.
It's chilling to realize how the same short-term thinking dictates two monumental destiny-shaping decisions. And this brings us to the profound conclusion the sources offer, which is one of the most important takeaways for you listening. Judith was not the problem, but the symptom.
That insight is so crucial, and is what makes her brief mention so incredibly powerful. She wasn't the initiator of the chaos, but she was the physical manifestation of Esau's moral and spiritual decline.
She was the outward sign of Esau's inward drift.
That's the quote. And this distinction is absolutely critical. The real warning isn't about her Hittite heritage in isolation. It's about the state of Esau's soul that allowed him to make such a choice without any consultation, without any spiritual reflection, or any regard for his parents' faith.
So his lack of value for the covenant led him naturally to devalue the spiritual alignment necessary in a partner.
It had to. He couldn't see the value in one, so he couldn't see the need for the other.
Wait, I need to probe that idea of the symptom a little further. If Judith is the symptom, why couldn't Isaac and Rebekah just manage the symptom? Why didn't they try to convert her, or maybe try to soften the conflict? Was the mandate really so non-negotiable?
That's an excellent question, and it really speaks to the nature of the covenant. While, individual redemption is always possible, the sources imply that Esau's choice was not merely marrying a non-believer, he was marrying into a system and a culture that was actively opposed to the covenant.
So the mandate was non-negotiable.
It had to be. because the entire purpose of the family was to preserve the purity of this monotheistic revelation. Tolerating polytheism meant willingly exposing the covenant to guaranteed erosion and eventual extinction. Judith wasn't just a spouse. She was a foreign, opposing ideological force, and Esau had introduced her willingly to the heart of the camp. The symptom was just too pervasive to treat with simple patience.
That makes the cost of this short-term thinking even heavier, specifically for Esau. The sources say his lineage fractured because he yoked himself to what didn't honor God. That's not just a poetic description, it's a factual statement about the disruption he caused to the sacred timeline.
The cost was monumental and generational. This wasn't just a personal disappointment for Esau, it was a spiritual decision that had cascading historic effects. By choosing Judith and Basemath, Esau effectively signaled to his entire lineage, and certainly to his parents, that he placed less value on the spiritual continuity of Abraham's covenant than he did on his own immediate personal desires.
He was prioritizing comfort over destiny.
Every time. And crucially, he contributed directly to the narrative, narrowing its focus away from him. The choice of the covenantal carrier shifted from Esau to Jacob, not just because of the one-time sale of the stew, but because the marriage proved that the stew was not a one-off mistake. It was indicative of his total, consistent disregard for his sacred destiny.
Right.
So the ultimate lesson here for anyone listening is that choices have consequences and destinies have costs. The cost for Esau was losing his primary position in the covenant, a consequence that began with the impulsive sale of his birthright, but was cemented, made permanent and physical by the impulsive, spiritually compromising choice of a spouse.
The spiritual division was now physically present, tangible, and disruptive in the family structure for years to come.
For the rest of their lives.
Now, it's easy to focus solely on Isaac and Rebekah's overwhelming grief, but the sources pull in that third key figure who was so central to the family's future, Jacob.
Yes.
The text notes that Jacob was watching it all unfold.
And this is a highly significant, yet often overlooked layer of the story. Jacob, the sibling who would ultimately inherit the main covenantal blessing, was not living in a vacuum. He was growing up immersed in the loud daily consequences of his brother's destructive decisions.
He didn't just hear stories about his father's frustration.
No, he lived through the bitter life created by Judith and Basemath. This constant tension must have been intensely formative for him.
Let's really explore that, the formative effect of Judith's presence on Jacob. What specific hard lessons do you think he internalized from observing this spiritual train wreck of a marriage?
Well, he witnessed firsthand the precise long-term devastation caused by spiritual misalignment and impulsivity in marriage. I mean, just imagine what that household dynamic was like.
It must have been awful.
Isaac and Rebekah are constantly distressed. Esau is likely volatile and defensive about his choice, and Judith is introducing foreign, perhaps unsettling, religious or cultural practices. Jacob saw the erosion of peace, the fragmentation of family unity, and the genuine anguish of his parents. This observation wasn't just passive viewing, it fundamentally informed his perception of what was absolutely required to protect the covenantal promise he was soon to inherit.
So this trauma, this constant tension, it provides the context for Jacob's later caution in choosing his own wives and his intense dedication to the promise, even when he's dealing with the conniving Laban.
Exactly.
He wasn't just following rules. He had a living, breathing case study in relational failure right in his own home.
Absolutely. The sources emphasize how one marriage shifted the emotional climate that Jacob grew up in. Jacob saw that if a choice made by a single person at 40 years old, choice of a partner, could shatter the peace and introduce such palpable spiritual danger into the home of the covenant bearer, then relational decisions were not optional choices.
They were maybe the single most important decisions one could ever make.
They had to be. And this surely ingrained in him a deep sense of strategic, cautious, and intensely prayerful choice regarding his own future lineage.
That is a powerful realization. Judith, a woman who never utters a single word in Scripture, provided a crucial, silent, and deeply necessary lesson to the man who ultimately became the father of Israel.
She was the negative object lesson.
The lesson that guaranteed Jacob's eventual success and vigilance.
And this brings us right to the profound wisdom hidden in that silence. Even though Judith's life is defined by this lack of personal detail in Scripture, the devastating strife she symbolized makes her life speak loudly, as the source material claims.
Okay, so now we need to distill the core lessons that this deep dive highlights for us, transforming this ancient history into actionable insight for you, the learner.
Let's do it.
Let's break down the 4 key teachings systematically as the analysis outlines them. The first teaching, the most direct consequence. Who you join yourself to shapes your future.
This is the brutal reality of Esau's story. By marrying a Hittite who actively did not worship the God of Abraham, Esau wasn't just marrying a person, he was actively marrying into a foreign culture, a differing spiritual path, and guaranteeing conflict. This is the relational consequence.
The person you link your destiny to will either build up or actively tear down your commitment to your own highest purpose.
Without a doubt. Judith's lack of spiritual alignment was, quite literally, the wrecking ball that shattered the peace of Isaac's home.
And this isn't just about marriage, is it? For anyone listening, this applies to every significant partnership.
Exactly. Think of it in modern terms. You could be choosing a business partner whose ethics are fundamentally opposed to yours. Or maybe choosing a close circle of friends whose lifestyle systematically undermines your health or professional goals. You are yoking your future to their trajectory.
And if they are drifting away from your purpose, they will drag you with them.
They will. Just as Judith and Bay Smith dragged the entire household into bitterness.
Okay, the second teaching. This one addresses the difficulty of choice in an open world. Not every open door is from God.
This focuses entirely on the discernment challenge. Look, Esau was a successful hunter. He was 40 years old, a mature man, perhaps feeling entitled or just, desiring a wife. Judith and Bay Smith were available. They were local. They were convenient.
He took the path of least resistance.
He did, the path of convenience. And the sources warn us that just because a path, a relationship, or an opportunity is available, an open door, it doesn't mean it aligns with your ultimate destiny or your covenant. Discernment is necessary to differentiate between what is available and what is appropriate for your life's sacred purpose.
Convenience is often the enemy of destiny.
It's a powerful way to put it, and it's so true. In a world full of opportunities, you have to realize the most attractive path might be the one that leads you away from your true north.
And Esau failed that test twice.
He did. First, by valuing the convenience of the stew over the complexity of the birthright, and second, by valuing the convenience of a local attractive marriage over the complexity and discipline required to choose an aligned partner.
The third is absolutely critical, especially in a culture that prioritizes immediate feeling. Alignment matters more than attraction.
This is the prioritization principle. We can assume Esau was attracted to Judith.
Right.
Whether physically, culturally, or perhaps she offered him a sense of excitement outside the restrictive covenant life. But the sources argue that shared purpose and spiritual faith alignment should have absolutely superseded those immediate feelings.
So alignment is about walking the same path toward the same ultimate destination.
Yes, attraction is fleeting. Alignment ensures the long-term integrity of the relationship and, critically, the spiritual legacy of the home you're trying to build. Esau inverted this priority. He chose the short-term feeling over the necessary long-term foundation.
It's the difference between building a house on bedrock versus building it on sand, just because the sand felt softer at the moment.
Exactly that. The bedrock of a relationship is that shared foundation and purpose. When the foundations clash, the entire structure is vulnerable to collapse, or at least to constant corrosive tension, which is exactly what Isaac and Rebekah experienced.
And finally, the fourth teaching, which loops back to the large-scale consequence that affected Jacob. Your relationships can build or break your spiritual legacy.
This speaks directly to the long-term impact on destiny. For Esau, his impulsive choice contributed significantly to the eventual fracturing of his lineage away from the primary covenantal line. His choices weren't just confined to his personal happiness, they actively affected the generational spiritual narrative.
The sources really compel us to understand that relational decisions have implications that far exceed the individual.
They're foundational to building a legacy that honors purpose. Judith's story provides the clearest, most condensed evidence possible. The wrong relationship broke Esau's entire legacy and introduced a permanent spiritual shadow.
Now we have to connect this ancient story fully to the modern listener, to you. We've used analogies, but let's dive into the core application. The questions posed in the source material are so relevant today. Have you been drawn to something that looks good, convenient, exciting, immediately fulfilling, but isn't ultimately right for your long-term purpose?
Or are you currently in relationships or environments that are actively pulling you away from peace, from purpose, and from your core values?
I think the profound relevance lies in the subtlety of the danger.
It does. As humans, we often look for external loud warnings, the sudden catastrophes. But Judith's story is a silent, subtle, yet absolute warning about ignoring small decisions consistently. For the modern learner, this impulse might not be about marrying a Hittite, but maybe about choosing a partner, a business associate, or even a career environment that actively undermines your core values or spiritual health every single day.
I think the tendency to rationalize the small compromise is the subtle danger the source material highlights. To say, oh, it's just this one thing, I can handle it.
Precisely. We often tell ourselves that we're strong enough to withstand the corrosive effect of misalignment. But Esau demonstrates that a consistent stream of short-sighted choices, the stew, the wife, the disregard for his inheritance, is what ultimately solidified his loss of destiny. You don't lose your way in one spectacular explosion, you lose your way 1 degree at a time.
Every decision, especially relational ones, is a building block.
It is. And the analysis reminds us that your future is built one choice at a time. The necessity is clear. We must choose wisely and prayerfully with alignment at the forefront of our minds.
That level of detail is exactly what makes this deep dive so valuable. So let's wrap up this analysis by circling back to the original mystery. Why spend all this time on a single sentence that mentions an overlooked wife? What is the final synthesis here for the learner?
The final wisdom nugget, as provided in the source material, brings it all home. Sometimes the people Scripture barely mentions carry the biggest warnings and the deepest wisdom. Judith's story is powerful precisely because it is so condensed. It functions as a complete, self-contained, and devastating lesson in spiritual consequence and the centrality of alignment in all relational choices. The story tells us that great destinies can be derailed by small impulses.
She is the silent teacher, demonstrating the immense life-saving value of discernment and patience, not just for the patriarchs, but for us today.
Indeed. Judith serves as a powerful, concentrated caution against impulse, proving that the health of a spiritual lineage relies so heavily on the wisdom and foresight used in choosing those closest to you. Her mention, brief as it is, perfectly completed the portrait of Esau as a man entirely governed by the immediate, regardless of the eternal, painful cost.
So to recap the core understanding we gained today, Judith's identity as a Hittite and her lack of faith created immediate, profound, and chronic strife in the home of Isaac and Rebekah. This constant conflict served to reveal Esau's fundamental, impulsive character.
A character that valued immediate gratification.
Right. Immediate gratification and convenience over the spiritual covenant, paralleling that catastrophic birthright sale. Ultimately, Judith's presence demonstrated beyond a shadow of a doubt that relational choices fundamentally affect family destiny and peace, and that alignment is just non-negotiable for spiritual continuity.
And that leads us to a final provocative thought, which builds on the idea that maybe both Esau and Judith acted impulsively in choosing each other.
Oh, that's interesting.
We've established that Esau chose based on convenience and immediate attraction, showing his disregard for the covenant. But we know Judith was a Hittite, likely disconnected from that covenantal faith. We also know Esau was the successful hunter, the worldly man of power and status, certainly more attractive in a material sense than the plain man Jacob who lived in tents.
So, you're suggesting that if Judith's choice of a husband was influenced heavily by Esau's reputation as this worldly, successful hunter, a man who could provide status or security outside of the covenant, did her marriage choice reflect her own impulse? Maybe the desire for immediate status or wealth or social gain, a short-term worldly reward?
That is the compelling thought. If so, her decision mirrors Esau's desire for convenience, a quick fix to a deeper need, whether it was physical hunger for him or social status for her.
So the devastating misalignment wasn't just Esau's failure to choose wisely,
but perhaps the natural consequence of two individuals, Judith and Esau, both pursuing their own immediate, unaligned, and self-serving impulses, which would ensure that their union would be defined by perpetual mutual disruption. It's a reminder that misalignment can happen even when both partners seem to get exactly what they thought they wanted.
A perfect, tragic parallel of impulse meeting impulse, resulting in decades of shared family disruption. Thank you for joining us for this incredibly detailed deep dive into the overlooked story of Judith.
Thank you.